Are you performing leadership or actually leading? I'm Chisom, and this is Overnight Wisdom, a podcast for leaders who are done pretending. Money touches every aspect of our lives, yet most of us were never taught how to truly understand it, let alone master it. Here's a question. Are you designing your wealth, or is your wealth designing you? Most people don't choose their financial lives, they inherit them. They follow scripts about what success looks like, what they're supposed to buy, and how they're supposed to live. And then they wonder why financial freedom feels impossible. My guests today are Ken and Mary Okoroafor, founders of The Humble Penny and authors of the book Financial Joy and the forthcoming book, The Wealth Habits. Together, they reached financial freedom in their early 30s, not through luck, but through intentional choice, disciplined habits, and the courage to live differently. We talk about what it takes to build wealth without losing your peace, how identity shapes your financial future, and why small, consistent actions matter more than dramatic one-time moves. We explore money in relationships, raising financially confident children, and how to stop performing success and start designing a life that actually fits. If you've ever felt behind with money, overwhelmed by financial advice, or stuck living someone else's definition of success, this conversation will meet you where you are and show you a different way forward. This is not just about getting rich. It's about building a life of freedom, clarity, and intention. Let's dive in. Ken and Mary, welcome to Overnight Wisdom. Really excited to have you here. How are you doing?
We're great. We're great.
Doing well.
Thank you so much for having us on your podcast.
Yeah, very excited having this chat.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So I like to jump right into things, and I'd love to get to know you both. You've both achieved a great feat, financial freedom at 34. Is that correct?
That's
right. That seems like a dream for a lot of people. So I think that's wonderful. And you've done this by making decisions and sticking to them. Sometimes decisions that go against cultural norms and what other people, obviously, in your age group, our age group currently are doing. Can you take us back to the beginning? How did you end up building Humble Penny Company?
Great. So, really good question. When I think back to where we began, I've not really talked about this point a lot, but it's probably good to mention it on this podcast. But one moment I can think back to was I usually say the Humble Penny began at 35,000 feet. I was on a journey to the US, and back then I was working as a UK finance director for an American asset manager. And during that flight, it was just me. And I was required to fly to America maybe once every quarter, thereabouts, or maybe twice a year. But during that flight, I had an epiphany. You know, when you're just like on a flight and you're thinking to yourself, like, is this how my life is going to be for a long time? You know, I'm just thinking to myself, like, what do I really want? And it transpired during that flight in my personal reflection that I actually wanted to do something with the skills that I had, but also with some of the stuff Mary and I had been learning on our money journey. Connected to that, when I came back from that journey, I also, around the same time, went to a men's event called Iron Sharpens Iron in the UK. It's like a men's conference. And during that men's conference, I heard a few things that really made me just think, you know what? I felt like I was being called to, you know, do something. Definitely. It was very clear. And then when we got back, I started talking to Mary about the idea of starting a blog. And then what did we do next?
So we sat in the kitchen, we had our big whiteboard up, and we were coming up with various names. It wasn't really hitting. Ken was like, it has to symbolize wealth, money, but also have a biblical perspective. And that's literally where it just popped in our heads, the Humble Penny.
You had Humble Penny.
Sorry, I had Humble Penny first. and you did a quick check, it wasn't available.
Yeah.
So we added the humble penny to it. And I just feel like from day one, it was just God ordained, God inspired, because the names we were coming up with just were not landing as well as this one did. Even today, people always say, love the name, the humble penny. And yeah, all thanks to God.
So in your own words, like, what does it mean to you, the humble penny?
The humble penny means you're someone who's potentially starting from small beginnings, but you have big ambitions about your life and the future you're trying to design or create for yourself. And you're on a journey, basically. So it's almost saying, don't despise your small beginnings. Don't overlook like where you're at. You might be behind in your finances, in your career. You might be a first generation immigrant. You might be have had a career setback, right? But there is a pathway you can follow, to get to where you want to get to. So the humble penny almost represents where you're at and that vision you have for your life potentially.
So at the beginning point where you thought, okay, let's start a blog, let's do this thing, was a thought, okay, we're going to build a company, we're going to teach people about financial freedom, and we're going to do, was that there somewhere?
So at this stage, we were reading a lot, and Mary and I had been going on our own journey for years. And we'd achieved significant milestones on our own as a family. But the vision at the beginning was really like, we were used to seeing a particular kind of person on the internet. It was typically, white male, and they maybe had, certain privileges. But no one was really telling the story of maybe a couple, maybe with immigrant background, maybe raising children and the challenges. There are a lot of things people were not talking about. So for us, the vision was literally, let's start this blog. We're going to publish 3 times a week. I was doing a lot of writing Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. Mary was doing all the creative stuff, all the imagery and direction and that sort of thing, and making sure we actually stuck to and doing everything else when I was busy writing.
Yeah.
And that was it. So we didn't really know where it might go. It wasn't like, I'm going to build this company. It's a passion project. I've got a job. I'm doing my role as a CFO. Mary had a job managing a business, and we just had this thing on the side. And then,
yeah, it was really, like Ken said, a faith walk. We didn't really know where it would lead, but we just knew that it was needed by our communities. So that was enough for us to get started.
Thanks for sharing. I'm also just thinking about, I'm an economist, so I love all things money, finance. Let's talk about it any day. And I do also read a lot and listen to a lot of podcasts about everything, including finance and building wealth. And I think I can count probably on my hands how many men of color, Black men, and I say men because it's usually men, and usually also based out of the US.
Yes.
And also when I reached out to you and we haven't chat about this, Ken, also just saying about it'd be really great to actually talk to people who've done this from another context outside of the US, because in the US, they talk about all these funds that are specific to the US. And I'm thinking, for those listening to this outside of the US, what then? What do they do? And of course, it's not also common to see a couple doing this together. I think a Black couple doing this together. And of course, I will talk more with Mary about this, because I think there's also something to be said about women in general in how they lean into or not finance and wealth. And I think especially for immigrant communities and communities of color. So I think what you're doing is absolutely phenomenal. So great work. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I want to ask, I think you both talk about something called radical countercultural decisions. Can we first define that? What is that?
Do you know what? A way I'd look at that is just doing things differently to how society or culture nudges you to do them, or trains you to do them, or conditions you to do them. So it's almost stepping away from the script of life. You probably have something to add to that?
Yeah, just doing things, I guess, different to the grain, to what is expected of us from family, culture, society. And it's being confident knowing that we don't have to follow that same script, because we know who we are and what we value. So yeah, if you feel like you're doing something different to what is, I guess, expected of you, that's, I guess, your version of radical countercultural decisions. And that will look differently for different people based on what is expected of you, and what you feel maybe that, yeah, you need to do because of that.
I love that. I think that also feeds directly into what I built this season or this year of the podcast around, which is identity clarity, knowing who you are, where you stand, what you will not trade for anything. And I'm thinking about, when did this shift? Or I'm wondering, when did this shift happen for you? Was there did it happen organically and then you woke up one day and thought, oh, I don't know where that came from? Or was there a day and night for you?
I'd say that it happened over time. So a big part of what's been our journey has been focusing a great deal on personal development. So weirdly, Mary and I met at a conference, a property investing conference, organized by the author of the book, Rich Dad Poor Dad, many, many years ago, back in 2009. And it's interesting because a big part of what's helped with that realization was basically understanding that there are different pathways to achieving what we wanted to achieve out of life. But society and the way we've been brought up has always just been this conditioning of go to school, get good grades, work your way up in your career, and if you're lucky, retire at 65, and then that will be it. But we've always, through opening our eyes actually to how other people were operating, we thought to ourselves, hang on a sec, why do I need to have a mortgage for 25, 35, 40 years? Why not have it for less than 10 years? Why do I need to sit at my cubicle? No offense to anybody working in a cubicle. We just wanted a different life. We just wanted, having observed our parents and that sort of thing, we just wanted a different pathway. So I'd say it's a combination of different things. And also the fact that we have an immigrant background. So we felt like we were starting from behind. And so doing that meant we had to approach life quite differently.
Yeah. And I think for me as well, there wasn't a specific moment, like you said, just observing that there were so many different ways of achieving your goal. One, which might mean that you have to trade your time for money, or you can work a bit smarter by becoming a business owner and investor. And you can also do this whilst being an employee, but there are so many different ways to achieve your goal. So it's how are we able to achieve our goal, but whilst not burning out, sacrificing our values? Those were the questions we began to ask ourselves. So just observing, for example, my parents, decisions that they made, and where we got them, decisions that my older siblings made. I had the benefit of hindsight, being able to learn from their mistakes, but also learn from the things that they did well. And so that example, we witnessed the global financial crisis in 2008. I also noticed the dot-com bust in the 2000s, which affected my older siblings who were working in tech at the time and became redundant. There were mass redundancies. He was now living back at home from once living in a penthouse in Docklands and having a convertible to now having to start again from zero and build to save for a deposit for a home. So from a young age, I didn't know what these things were, but also like my dad going to Nigeria to bury his parents. And when he came back, he was never able to get another corporate job. It was doing work where he was way overqualified for. And I was thinking, and he still had a mortgage that he was nowhere near paying off. Because like Ken said, you're taught to believe this is your term, 25-year mortgage, and you just pay the minimum when there's another way. And so, I couldn't, books and reading up on personal finance books helped to put the terminology and the vocabulary to what it was that I wanted, which was financial independence. So there were many different events. And then also when we were working, you went through redundancy during the global financial crisis. So did I. Ended up in another role where in the space of 3 years, there were 3 waves of redundancies in that company. Although I wasn't affected, I could see the stress that it placed on the colleagues, the atmosphere. And I realized that we didn't want to just rely on one income, one salary, that there was a different way where we wouldn't just have to rely on an employer. So that answers your question. There were just many things.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think you make a lot of really great points, right, around what happens when redundancies happen. I live in the Nordics and we have a pretty strong social system. So maybe that's something to fall back on, but that's not the reality for a lot of people across the world. And there's also an identity piece that is attached to your job. I mean, when people meet you, they're like, hi, what do you do? Nobody cares that, you clean your house or like you're a good friend. People want to know what's the job, what's the title. And I think there's a lot of identity that is attached to who we are, what we do. And then when we lose that work, there is a crisis that happens. And both of you said earlier, Ken, you worked as a CFO. Mary, you were managing a business. For people who are listening to this and going, oh my gosh, that's the life. Because I'm with you that I don't think a lot of people really want to sit behind a cubicle. I think they do it because they have to, maybe there are a few people in the world, but most people probably want more for themselves. And if somebody's listening and just saying, okay, this sounds great. Where do I start? You all talked about challenging the norms around why do I have to do this for 25 years? Why can't I do it for 10? And 10 is ambitious in the current world we have. Yeah. So is the starting point pick something that seems unattainable or reframe your mind around what is attainable? So I'm just trying to gauge for our listeners, where do they start?
So I think ultimately what you're talking about there is that a listener might be living potentially according to somebody else's financial script, right? So where should they start basically, and what's their sort of first steps in figuring that out? It's interesting. We've been going through a process recently because we have a new book coming out, The Wealth Habit. And in chapter 3 of that book, the chapter is called The Wealth Identity Shift. And the reason this is important is there's a lot of misalignment when we look at trying to achieve various outcomes in our lives. A lot of people have misalignment tied to identity. And coming back to your question on where should you actually start? How do you start to follow the script that's ideal for the life that you actually want so that you can achieve the sort of goals you want in your financial life? I'd say the first step is actually to start by noticing rather than changing just yet. So noticing that you are potentially living life according to somebody else's financial script, and almost interrupting it. I think that's the very first thing to do. So we teach people to begin by asking one simple question. And that one simple question is, when I'm going about my financial life, whether it's looking at expenses I'm incurring or decisions about my career or, but keeping it to cost, for example, or debt I'm incurring, the decisions I'm making around that, the question should be, who is this decision really for? Every time money's going out, we should really be asking ourselves, this purchasing decision I'm making, am I doing it because I value it? Or am I doing it because it's signaling success? Am I doing it because it's going to create safety? Or am I doing it because it's going to create approval for somebody else? There's a very important question Mary likes to ask me when I'm almost exceeding some of my allowance for daily chocolate. Mary would say to me, would your future self thank you for this choice? Would my future self thank me for this choice? Okay. So people listening, a lot of this stuff might seem abstract. So I'm going to try and make it really practical. So let's say one thing we'd highly recommend is just thinking about track, for example, your last 30 days of spending. And almost circle, because what I'm trying to hone in here is on what do we value and what does that thing we value, how does it affect the identity we currently hold? Because it's the identity that then shapes everything else. That's shaping the direction you're heading in. But then there are clues in our expenses. So for the last 30 days, could you actually look back and circle things that surprised you in your spending, things that stressed you in your spending, or things that felt a bit performative, like you were trying to impress somebody or keep up and so on? These are little clues of some misalignment in one's finances and begin to almost point to what we value as individuals. Now, coming back to the wealth identity shift real quick, we always say, imagine a pyramid for the person who's listening. At the bottom of that pyramid is the words identify it. In the middle of that pyramid are the words act it. And then at the top of that pyramid are the words reinforce it. Do you want to just speak to each one maybe?
So relating to identifying, what you're doing is, without naming the old belief, you can't actually change it. So it's when you notice the financial identities that you carry or you live out, you'll notice that when you really reflect, that a lot of them often come from childhood, failure, or even culture. So the questions that listeners should ask themselves is, what are your money beliefs? Where do they come from? But also, are they serving or sabotaging you? And then the active piece is then your behavior reshapes your beliefs. So if you start acting like the person that you want to become, even before you actually truly believe that you're that person, it helps. So if you want to be a better investor, for example, or you want to start investing, then you can start by transferring £1 or $1 into,
or €1.
into €1 into an account. Or do you want to be more financially disciplined? Review your spending weekly. These are small, low-hanging fruit things that you can do, and then you want to reinforce it.
And the reinforcing bit is that identity is solidified through repetition. That's really the point. And then to begin to solidify that shift Mary's just been talking about, you can do certain things. You can make it visual, for example, having trackers, having a future self vision board. You could make it social. You can join certain communities, certain spaces where certain people are doing what you're trying to do. And you can make it verbal. Like affirmations are great things. For example, every euro or every dollar I manage multiplies into purpose or into freedom. So these little things that we often ignore, these almost unspoken bits to the lives we are trying to achieve, are things we believe need to be settled first. So that identity shift needs to happen before one can then start to look at, I want to become financially free. I want to become mortgage free. I want to become, all these things. If you are operating from a place of poverty in the mind, none of that would actually ever happen. There needs to be a shift first in who you see yourself as. If you just saw yourself as, I'm always struggling every month to manage my finances, you actually carry on struggling. But if you see yourself as, do you know what? I'm starting to think of myself as a wealth builder. I've paid all my bills this month, and that's been great. That's a step towards wealth building. That in itself is a different identity by itself.
I love that. I love what I'm hearing. I'm also hearing that I'm a speak it into existence kind of person, So sometimes I'm a writer. I love to write. And even before I published any article, people ask me, I'm just a writer, right? Because I write. I don't need that validation of like being published necessarily to claim that identity. And then you just start thinking of yourself as that. But I was also thinking just in terms of bad habits. Like if you're trying to quit smoking cigarettes, for example, if you say I'm trying to quit, you might be more tempted than saying I've quit.
Yes.
Right? Because then that is a different sense of identity that you're creating. At least that's what I'm hearing from you. And also, I wanted to come to Mary, actually, because what you were talking about in terms of making it concrete, both of you, I think that's really great in terms of track your behaviors, be it over a month. How are you spending money? Where is money going? A lot of people lose a lot of money to like monthly subscriptions, and sometimes they don't even know or pay attention to it. I remember talking to my girlfriends, a lot of them, because I'm always like, do you know about your money? What have you invested in? I'm probably a pain in the butt for a lot of them, and a lot of them just said there's so much shame attached to money for them. And they mostly leave it up to for those who are married, to their husbands or their partners. And also sometimes they hide what they spend from their partners because sometimes they think they just do it without thinking. And I've said something like things like, I think it's quite important to even print out your, your bank statements. I think we're quite used to everything being online, that sometimes things don't clock.
Yes.
Yeah. So print out your bank statement and look at where is my money going and why, because that way you can circle things and clarify it. But Mary, I want to ask you about this, as a woman, before you found your why and sought to stand in that power, what was the version of financial independence and success that I guess you were kind of like born into as a woman, specifically within that identity?
Great question. So I think for me, it helped that I grew up learning certain habits like budgeting and saving when I lived with my parents. So they emigrated to the UK in the late 70s, started from zero. And yes, you can, and for being from the Yoruba Ijebu tribe, they're known for being good with their money. For being frugal, but also being generous. And they're able to be generous and give because they look after their pennies. And so that was the background that I had. And I just always, from a young age, I guess there was an expectation to earn money. I don't know. There wasn't pressure, but I just was always earning from a very young age, whether it was doing the paper round in secondary school or working in retail as well. I thrived seeing my bank balance, my little savings account grow, even if I was barely making any interest from that. So that was a good foundation. But then what helped me unlearn any social conditioning was that I wasn't trying to become a financial expert overnight. I saw that there was a gap between what I knew and what I needed to learn to be able to achieve what I wanted, which was financial freedom. I was good at saving and making money, but then I wasn't very confident in investing. And I guess that's where we found ourselves, well, where Ken met me at a property investment seminar. I wanted to get into property, but I didn't have the confidence. So that meant, doing whatever reading I needed to do or development. And so, yes, there might be friction between like where you are now and where you need to get to, and that gap in between, how do you fill it? You can do that by reading books. There's so many podcasts, there's a wealth of information now. Watch The Humble Penny, our videos, speak to people, but the key is to just start and ask certain questions, sit at tables, make small decisions, and you build confidence eventually through action. And something simple, like you said, printing out your bank statements. You don't know like what to change or what to tweak if you don't know what your current habits are. So just being aware of your spending, your income, your expenses, and where there's any drains or what you can tighten. That means that you're working now with intention and not just you're not being blind about it. And I think for women, financial confidence, it doesn't come from knowing everything. It just comes from ownership, seeing money as a tool of choice, safety, and self-trust, not just as something that you fear or maybe outsource to your partner or to your husband. It's very important to have that confidence when it comes to managing your personal money and not relying on somebody, because when you do that, you won't even know if maybe the money is not being invested well, or you don't want to be surprised where they say shit hits the fan, but you totally outsourced it to somebody and now you're both in a pickle. You can also be in the driver's seat, but do it together, whether you're like a co-pilot, but you're doing it together and you are aware of where your money is going, how it's being saved, how it's being invested. It's important for you. It's important for your future. You're not relying on somebody.
2 follow-up questions for you, and spot on. The first is, earlier you said I was saving. You liked watching your savings account grow, even though you weren't making any interest from it. Speak to that.
So like I said, I started earning from a very young age. And so I was in a position now where at the bank, I was asked, oh, would you like to open up an ISA account? I was like, oh, what is that? This was in my late teens, I'm trying to remember, early 20s. And
ISA stands for?
Individual savings account. So there was an option between a cash ISA and a stocks and shares ISA. I was basically in the bank talked out of investing in a stocks and shares ISA because I just heard high risk. So I kept it in a cash ISA for many years because for me, I felt like, it was a safer option. But obviously reading books, I realized that if you want to make your money work hard for you without you having to trade time for money, you have to, take some, what's the word? Risks, but calculated risks. And so my money wasn't serving me well in just a simple savings account or in a cash ISA. It's good for some people in a certain stage of life. Maybe if you're soon to purchase a property, you want to be able to quickly take the money out. But for somebody who's quite young, in your 20s, you want to put your money in an environment where it can compound quicker for you. So yeah, basically that was it. Being confident to be able to invest and not just see it in a savings account.
I'm just gonna like cut out this section and send it to all my girlfriends because I think I think it's so important. Because I talk to friends who are like, yeah, I have $10,000 in a savings account, and I'm like, why? Do you need it? In a month, in 2, in 3? They're like, no. I just like to see that I have some money. I'm like, the money can be working for you, girl. What are you doing? Yeah, but people don't know. And then I have one more question for you, and then I'm coming to Ken. You talked about having this foundational awareness around budgeting and making money, which of course fits very well into being a Nigerian woman, regardless, like it works. At the same time, I think what I often find counterintuitive when I talk to African women and Nigerian women as well is a lot of the Nigerian economy is upheld by mom stores, women who run businesses, in the markets, just everywhere. And at the same time, there's this idea that, no, my man should be the breadwinner and the person who takes care of everything. Even if I was a financial whiz before I got married, the minute I get married, it's part of my duty to then you kind of outsource everything to him. So for the Africans or anyone anywhere listening to this who feels that, oh, this is how they ended up here, and this is kind of like a sign of respect or trust for their husband, what do you want to say to them?
Great question. I feel like when you get married, especially when you have children, sometimes your priorities may change for a season. And sometimes, in the process of, going through all those changes, you might actually lose yourself in a process. But it's important to remain who you are. Don't lose yourself in a process and don't outsource things only to your husband. And the reason why is that your husband actually is carrying many hats. And, I think men often don't talk about the pressure that they face as breadwinners. I think they would love for their women to help out financially, but also, and not just leave it to the man to do. It's actually quite risky. You're assuming that your husband is going to be able to be always earning, right? And when he is earning, that the money is being invested well for your future. And by that, I mean money is being set aside for your pension pot. Because what women risk as well is that they put themselves at risk by not putting money towards their pension, because they could get to a situation where the husband's like, he's not earning anymore, there's no income coming in, and you don't have a pension pot, but yet you're close towards retirement. You've not worked on your own career. You're now having to, as a big woman, go back into the world of work, but you're tired. You don't have the same energy. Whilst you're young and you still have the energy and the time, you want to make sure that you're doing things together. It's important to have joint goals. You can have your own separate goals, but it's important to have joint goals that you're working towards together, and you're both checking in, whether that's weekly, money days, or you can meet monthly, but talk about those goals that you both have. When do you want to retire? What does your retirement pot size look like to make you feel like you're comfortably retiring? Where do you want to live in the next few years? What plans do you have for your children? What goals, how much do we need to put into those different pots, and for what duration, so that we can then retire at X age? Those are the kind of conversations you need to be having together, and you can't rely and trust that your partner is doing all those things and is thinking in that same way.
I love this. Sorry, Ken, you wanted to say something, and then I have a question.
Word retire is quite has different definitions. Right? For some people, when Mary says retire, she doesn't mean stop working and just sit on your bum at home or sit at the beach and do nothing. Like, you might still be consulting, you might be a non-exec, you might, you got things going on, you got things that you're doing. You might be running a passion project or volunteering or whatever. Effectively, you're designing a life that truly works for you.
And you have the option also of early retirement if that's something that you want.
Yeah. The other thing I was just going to add real quick to what you were saying earlier is when one partner leaves the decision making entirely to the other person, it's the same as putting all your eggs in one basket, because there's a risk dimension to that, because we all have different attitudes to risk. The person who you're outsourcing everything to could actually be entirely reckless with money, or they could have a really toxic relationship with money. So there is wisdom in two people seeing almost like a prism, seeing different aspects of household finances, because it helps to diversify thinking, it helps to diversify ideas, it helps to almost put in place checks and balances for reckless decision making and reckless investing. There are times where, like, a guy, and this could happen to a woman as well, you could like open your WhatsApp, and you're seeing all these stock tips and meme coins and all these things, and everyone's going mad about it. And you might just take your entire household finances or savings and plow it all into this one stock, or all into this one, crypto coin or meme coin or whatever, because everyone says it's going to go to the moon. But you didn't even spend time to say to your partner, hey, we've been working for years to build up these savings. Oh my goodness, I didn't even consult you. I made this decision, right? So there's wisdom in two people questioning. One person says, I want to do this. The other person is actually, hang on, does this align with our vision? Does it align with this? Would it put us at risk if we lost everything? Do we have an emergency fund set aside? Is this money you're using money we've put aside for something else, like savings towards another goal? So there is something there about communicating. But this is the problem with money. A lot of couples don't really communicate, they don't really sit down and talk about boring admin. Have we got life insurance? Have we, very, very, very boring things. I mean, we often say that wealth building, a big part of wealth building is actually about doing admin. People don't want to do the admin. And a big part of that admin is us having a chat. How are we doing? What's going on? What happened last month? What's happening in the next 2 weeks? And that sort of thing.
Just to add to that, the irony is that, women don't invest as much as men, but women, when they do invest, are actually known to be better at investing because we're more risk averse. We do our research. We don't, jump on the hype, basically. So, the wealth of wisdom and, a different point of view from a woman is definitely needed and would be valued in these kind of decision-making process. So it's hard though. I think it's hard to talk about money and things like this as a couple if you're not naturally aligned. I know things were a bit easier for us because we were already more aligned towards these things. Even just knowing that before we got married, we had premarital lessons at church, and they spoke about money, expectations from the role of the man and the woman. Knowing that money was the number one cause of divorce, what made us move with more intentionality and we just tried to see how we could do things together, even if we might not initially agree. And because we had a joint goal, it made us see how we can work to go together to achieve our joint goals. Yeah.
Why do you think money is such a big thing for couples?
It's very personal, isn't it?
And it's emotional.
Yeah. It's very personal and emotional. And we're all, like you touched on, have different relationships with money. And it's usually based on your personal upbringing, your personal environment, your unique experiences. And now you're coming together with somebody else who was brought up differently, had a different experience with money, different relationship. And now you're coming together and you feel like your way of doing things is right. And he feels like his way of doing things is right, but it's different. So there's a clash. And so it calls for a lot of understanding, communication, patience, no judgment. And the only way you get that understanding is by knowing what your money blueprint is. And a lot of people don't actually know what that is. They've not sat down to think, what's the money scripts I'm playing out subconsciously without even realizing what's the money scripts that's causing self-sabotage. People don't ask those questions. So there will naturally be a conflict.
A big part of why it's difficult for couples is also because decisions have been made individually about money. So when two people come together, one person might have savings, the other person might have lots of debt, for example. And so those previous decisions now come into a relationship setting and almost rocks the boat. So you might have been like enjoying life, you're all dating and, lovey-dovey. As soon as you bring up like what's happening with your finances, it's like, ooh, I think I love you, but then I'm not in love with the state of your finances. You see, so that creates a real conflict there, because then you start to go, is this a blind spot in my observation of this person? And then that starts to complicate things when you realize that it's not a one-time event. It didn't just happen in the past. This is actually who they are.
Or who they were.
Or who they,
you don't write someone off because they have debt.
No, but
what
if I'm saying
going forward.
No, but I know that, but but it doesn't change overnight. That's the thing. Behavior doesn't you don't just press a button and it's just reset. It's learned. There needs to be real intention, and there needs to be that commitment to, first of all, acknowledging it, and then gradually going, actually, what are the habits and behaviors I now need to adopt? And then systemizing it. In fact, this is actually where this comes in, the wealth habit. This is actually why we wrote this book, The Wealth Habit, because oftentimes what you know is not what's reality. Yeah. People know they shouldn't be in debt. Tons of people are in debt. Tons. Do they know? It's like smoking cigarettes. Lots of people know, no judgment by it. People know, lots of people. If I went to the shop right now, you see all those pictures on cigarette. They've got people like showing like what kind of bad health outcomes people can have.
Yeah.
So people know it's right there. But that doesn't mean that they will not smoke cigarette. That doesn't mean that they will not be in thousands of euros or dollars or pounds of debt. So it then comes back to, I've acknowledged that this is where I'm at. I have the knowledge, but how do I begin to make small changes? How do I pursue the right habits and behaviors? And how do I then systemize that in a relationship setting? That's when real change happens. So otherwise, people just keep going around in circles, and a big part of that is also that communication, because if two people are not aligned in, we recognize this is where we have a blind spot, where we have a bit of a weakness in our finances. If they don't recognize that and say, this is where we're at, there's no progress. In fact, one of the biggest reasons a lot of people struggle with their finances is their finances are siloed. He doesn't know what she's up to or what she's earning or what she's spending. She doesn't know how much he's earning or what he's spending or whatever. Because they're not even on the same page, they don't even have any visibility, because there's no transparency. It's almost like a house divided. And we know, a house divided doesn't really stand. It's only a temporary thing. You keep pushing, you keep trying, and then eventually you hear, sorry, we're contacting divorce lawyers or whatever, because you didn't really solve the root cause. The root causes were there, the clues are there, but, you were never really eye to eye when it comes to money.
Thank you both. I do want to talk about your book, actually.
Okay.
First question, just for my own curiosity. How do you write together?
So this is our second book now. The first book we wrote was Financial Joy. This one, The Wealth Habit, Small Changes.
Which I have, by the way, and loved it. Yeah, Ken was very kind to send me a copy.
Amazing. So I guess we just have our own rhythm of things that actually started from when we were writing the blogs. And so for a lot of that, Ken was writing a lot of the blog posts. I would maybe come up with ideas for titles, topics, help with the research, look for case studies. Although you say that you didn't get good English grades, I got better English grades, but you have become an exceptional writer.
Thank you.
Through there was a time when Ken was blogging 3 times a week without fail for like how long?
At least 12 months.
12 months. Yeah. So we just leaned onto each other's strengths, compile all the information, do all the research, and then Ken just puts it all together. And that's what worked for us. Other people, that have worked and written books together, they've maybe focused, I do one chapter, you do the next chapter. But we just wanted the tone and everything to flow seamlessly between each chapter. So unless there's something specifically like an experience that is mine, it's, written.
So you say, I do the boring work, you do the sexy work.
Always. That's just how our marriage has thrived.
And I'm happy with
that. In business and life. Yes.
I love it. For those listening who have not read your first book, which I thought was really great, what does this book do for them? What will it do for them?
So Our first book, Financial Joy, is a 10-week plan to help you banish debt, grow your money, and unlock financial freedom. We call it the reset. If there was one word to describe the book, it's a book that resets your relationship with money. Okay. The new book, The Wealth Habit, which is about the small changes that will make you rich, we call it the system. That's the one word for it. So you have a reset in your finances, but a lot of times people know things, as I mentioned earlier, but they don't know how to then take those things through small changes, because a lot of things overwhelm people. They're like, 25-year mortgage, investing, that's just too much. Question is what little things can I start to do today? What little small or tiny habits can I adopt today, tomorrow, next week? How do I then turn that into a behavior? How do I then systemize that? So this book, the new book, The Wealth Habit, that's what that's all about. It has all the frameworks. It has the global case studies. It's a very global book. We have case studies from all over the world, whether it's in Europe, Canada, Australia, Nigeria, Kenya, and so on. Different stories. So each chapter is walking you through 4 parts of the book. So the book is split into 4 pillars, which are build the mindset, build the habits, build the system, and build the life. That's what the book's about. And then there are 4 principles that kind of underlie that. Yeah. So that's how that book differs. And I'm excited. I'm so excited actually, because we've had incredible quotes for this book from some of the best-selling authors in the world have written some incredible quotes. And we can't wait for people to get hold of the book.
Yeah, we think this book is groundbreaking. We're not just saying that because we're not being biased, but we really do. And, it really rewires the way that you think about money and, turning financial success into a series of tiny, repeatable, like you said, actions, which would then compound into, wealth and well-being eventually. So, yeah, it doesn't matter where you are in your finances. This book can be, just start where you are. And it's about making those small, repeatable actions daily that help you build wealth over time.
And I want to just add, wealth in our new book, The Wealth Habit, is not just money. I want to be very clear on that. It's a holistic look at life. It's about, obviously, finances, but it's also about your well-being. It's about your heritage. It's about your health. It's so much more, because oftentimes society is just about get rich, get rich, get rich. No, we're saying get rich without losing your soul. Okay? Because there's so much more to money. Money is just a tool that enables so much more, enables impact, enables legacy, enables so much more. So when we say wealth, it encapsulates this more holistic definition about what it's about.
I really love this. And what is coming up for me currently is the importance of compound interest, not just financially, but everything you do in life, every decision you make, it compounds into the person you want to be, your future self, in a sense.
Yes.
And I think it's also really important what you're talking about around, it's not just one aspect of your life. What does your faith look like? What does your family relationship look like? And I keep thinking that to change a behavior, to change your life, oftentimes you have to let things go, right? It's really difficult to quit smoking when you're hanging around people who are still smoking. So for you, when you changed or made a decision to, okay, this is who we are, this is what we want, and we're going to go against the drain, what did it cost you? Did it cost you anything?
Do you know what? It cost us a number of things, but I think it's more about how we were beginning to be perceived by people. I think that's probably where it begins. So a big part of what changed, let me just think back now, when we started to kind of move differently and say, okay, this is what we want to do. I'd say, I'll give you some real practical examples. I'd say, number one, we at the moment drive a car that we bought secondhand. And that car, we've had it for 9 years so far. And it's not, when I say it's the opposite of sexy, that's what the car is. It's the complete opposite. I can leave that car unlocked. No one's going to break into it. I can forget it somewhere. I can even leave the door open. No one would touch it, just so you understand. Yeah. But the car works for us as a family. Our kids fit in the car. We fit in the car. It goes everywhere we go. Basically, it's not the most beautiful car. It doesn't mean that we can't go and spend money on a brand new, nice, Range Rover, or what are the new cars now that people drive? Some of these latest things. But some of the costs that you're talking about is how we're perceived sometimes, right? So it's like some people might look down on us and go, like, you drive that's your car. Like, even though it's a nice family car, but the fact that it's not what they perceive as wealth in their eyes or in society's eyes is a cost, because it's almost like a social currency when you drive a particular car, particularly coming from our culture. Nigerian culture, people like to show up, right? You see on social media, the way people think you're successful is through, what you're wearing, what you're driving, and that sort of thing. But there are also some other examples. Can you think of any?
Yeah, but just to add to that, it's freeing for us because we feel like we don't have to live up to other people's expectations of what success should look like. We just do what we feel is our version of success. But other examples is maybe declining certain invitations that don't really align with us. For example, unplanned travel costs. And it's also in some ways created some loneliness because we couldn't really talk about our goals with everyone. So it meant, especially for you, maybe having to find new friends who were kind of on the same journey as us or quite radical, because some of our friends might not have had that mindset. Sorry. It's quite radical, quite countercultural. For me, I feel my friends were like, yeah, Mary, go for it, that sounds amazing. But it's always important as well to make friends with people who are on that same journey as you, because it can be quite lonely. You leave your corporate job, that's all you've known, your whole identity's been around that, and now you're running your own business, or people say, oh, are you a YouTuber, are you an influencer? That kind of, it just kind of feels sometimes a bit lonely. You need to find your new crowd, basically.
Yeah, I was going to add as well, coming back to the costs. My career has been, well, a big part of my career so far has been in like the financial services industry, working in, the investment business and all of that kind of thing. And in that world, the markers of success are basically you live in a detached house in the countryside, or you maybe you live in London, but it's in a particular postal code, you live in like, and obviously the bit that's unspoken is you, as a result, if your house is less than £1 million or 1 million, whatever, you're still kind of playing it small, right? So having dreams like, actually, I don't want £1 million in mortgage or $1 million or €1 million. I just want what will work for us, and I want to pay it off. People, that wasn't really what people wanted to hear. That wasn't their definition of success, because it didn't fit the narrative of, I need this big C-level job so that I can afford this big house, so that I can afford 3 kids in private school, so that I can then do this thing, and all of that, right? So a big part of the cost was also not being aligned with everybody else's way of, this is what we talk about in the pub, or in the bar or whatever, because you're now veering off into a different direction, and it seems very foreign to them. This idea of financial freedom or whatever is very American. Leave it to the Americans. I'm like, but why? Why leave it to the Americans? Why do we need to just carry on doing life how it's been designed by the system? Why not just explore something else? So I hope those are some good answers. I'm not sure.
Yeah. What is actually coming up for me, you both remind me of Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett essentially has lived in the same house in Omaha forever. Apparently, his kids did not even know they were rich until, of course, people started treating them differently, and they thought, oh, what's happening? And that's what's coming up for me. And I think for those who are listening, I think it's also important to understand that when you are making any meaningful change in your life, you have to divorce yourself from other people's expectations. At least that's also what I'm hearing from you, is you cannot hold yourself to something you haven't kind of like co-signed, right? A lot of people just perform to fit in. They don't ever stop to do what y'all are saying is, what do I actually want? What are my values? What do I stand for? And how do I remove myself, like identify the pressures and remove myself from them? But I don't think it's easy. Like it's phenomenal.
No, it's not easy. And that performance has a cost. That keeping up, there's a true cost. But I don't think a lot of people have realized, firstly, that there's a cost. Almost like the scales falling out of your eyes and you suddenly seeing that, wait a sec, this choice I've made has meant that I now need to work for another 10 years. Like mandatory, I need to work. Not that I choose to work, I have to work because of this performance, this this lifestyle that I have. And it's not easy to shake because you are usually the average of the 5 people or so that you hang around with. And so if you're hanging around with people who are also performing, it's hard to shake, isn't it? It's hard to suddenly go, I'm not playing this game anymore. I want to exit. No. These are the people you have been following and, creating a life around. But that can also work in your favor because if somehow you interrupt that pattern, and that's possible, that's actually what we did. If you can gradually, and it doesn't happen overnight, it's not like a hard break, it's a gradual break. If you can interrupt that pattern and then replace those people around you with newer people who also share this new value system you have, you're far more likely to be able to see that change happen.
Yeah. And it's just asking yourself, these things that you feel like you're expected to do, yes, it's about knowing, is it an expectation or is it an obligation? When you realize it's actually not an obligation, it's an expectation from whether it's family, friends, culture, you free yourself from that. And it's now you can move from a place of peace and not pressure to live up to this expectation you feel you need to. Yeah.
I'm also thinking that there's also something about being okay with yourself. Because I think because we are social creatures, through socialization, there's that need about being in a group and being accepted and fitting in a sense. And, from what I'm hearing from you both is it's also okay to be lonely while you're figuring out, at least Mary had said earlier about it does feel isolating. And I think maybe that also manages expectations of what change requires, that sometimes you will feel isolated. And then perhaps it's also important to look inward and go, okay, what do I need? Yeah. What validation or affirmation am I seeking? And I think perhaps if you're in a community, because it's probably not always easy to let go of bad influence and then find the right people immediately. Those things take time. But maybe you can find it in your faith. Maybe you can find it in exercise. Maybe you can find it in going to the park with your children instead. I don't know. I guess what is coming up for me is that for those listening, thinking about, oh gosh, but I don't want to be alone. I need my community. It's like, what are systems that they could use to fill whatever gap this performance is currently filling for them, even though it leaves them unhappy and in debt afterwards?
I'd say straight away, like, let's be, I'm going to keep it very real. Being a weirdo is okay, right? I tell you, because a lot of times I feel like I'm the weirdo because I'm like, why am I thinking this way? And I'll be thinking this way. And that's actually okay. It's okay for you to be the person who is not popular. I want to make that clear. Who's not like the, funniest person in the room or the person in the room that most people agree with or whatever. It's okay to be that odd person who questions things and goes, actually, you lot are going that way. I'm going to go this way. I think that's such a good place to be. Yeah, because you will find that like when most people are doing something, you probably want to be looking the other way. That's what tends to happen. But in terms of like replacing or having some support system around that, I think community is very important. And Mary and I run a community called Financial Joy Academy, which is a membership community of like-minded individuals. And we created it because a big part of our personal journey has been quite lonely, I'd say. So first is our financial freedom journey, then it's our entrepreneurship journey, then is our journey, well, one of the first people in our sort of age group raising children, getting married and having children and raising children. So there are different aspects of the journey that mean that it's hard to find people that tick the boxes you really want. But community is one such place, and people can find communities in different parts of the world, whether it's online or offline. Offline communities are becoming very, very obviously needed more than ever. Our community is both online and offline, and if you're interested, you can kind of join from anywhere in the world, and we have people in different parts of the world. But it helps people shift mindset. This is the big part of it, is how are you thinking? Because without the foundation of mindset shifting, everything else, your skill set and everything else we've been talking about, investing, all these things don't really take root, because you're still caught up in maybe a scarcity way of thinking. This idea you mentioned earlier, like, I like to see my money in the bank account. That's scarcity thinking.
Yes.
That's actually not abundance. That's you going, this gives me security, so I like to see it.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas when you invest your money, you're still seeing it. You can still log into your app and see it. It's just your money is no longer in cash, it's now in an investment. And that's abundance thinking. That's multiplier effect happening. That's you going, actually, my $100 or $10,000 could become $30,000 in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years. That compounding effect is happening.
Yeah, totally that. And, you added to it as well. I think it's finding new communities, like you said, joining masterminds, trying out experiments and hobbies. And in doing so, you discover so much new things about yourself. You learn through experimenting new things. You don't put pressure on yourself to have a particular outcome, but you're just learning, you're getting feedback, and you're meeting new people in the process of doing so. So yeah,
I'm with you. I'm hearing what you're saying. And then I'm thinking about, a lot of stories I know of, especially of women who are not in a partnership, who are, say, single parents, trying to hold together 3 kids and all the bills that come with it. And they really want that mindset shift. And they're there, but you're just like, this mindset does not match my current reality, where I barely have any money at the end of the month to invest. Yeah, or to even save. What do they need to know?
Do you know what? I'm starting from what you're saying to me, basically, someone who's they feel like that they're behind, basically, right? And every single month they're not able to progress, and they're not seeing a bit of progress happening. I'd say the thing to recognize is that a big part of financial success or wealth building is actually a journey. And where you are now is a point on a money journey. And the important mindset shift is to realize that you're building from something rather than being stuck in a very specific place. One of the biggest things we talk about a lot is this idea of putting certain habits in place that enable the outcome that you want. So, for example, paying yourself first, right? A lot of us have this inverted, right? So when money comes in, we pay all our expenses, and then we go, oh, I have nothing left. When in actual fact, what we ought to do really is flip that and say, actually, when money comes in, I am worthy of the money I earn. I am worthy of keeping a percentage of what I bring in, which could be 10%, could be 20%, could be 5%. But the fact that you have that agency, the fact that you have that mindset of my current and future self are not strangers. Yeah, I'm worthy of keeping some of my money and serving my future self by investing that money. That one shift alone, listen, changes everything. Yeah, if you make $2,000 or pounds or euros or whatever, and you're keeping 200 every month, that begins to add up, right? You're keeping 10%, and that begins to add up. And if you're putting that money to work, as we've been discussing so far, it starts to buy you back some power. Because if you think about it, I was going on a train journey recently, and it was a packed train. It was packed. I was going during rush hour. And I was thinking to myself, and I looked around, I thought to myself, the one thing that connects everybody on this train journey and their future employer is a power dynamic. And that power dynamic runs on a currency, and that currency is money. If we can start to buy back some of our power, some of our sovereignty, some of that agency, the way you buy that back is to start to build up your savings and your investments. So next thing you know, you're going to have 3 to 6 months of expenses saved up. That's like, wow. You're not fighting fires anymore. If something breaks, you have some emergency money. Next thing you know, you've got 1 year of expenses saved and invested. And then you carry on building and building, right? But notice all this began with first the mindset. I'm a wealth builder. Even though I'm at a place where I'm not seeing money left over, the fact that my mindset's shifting and my identity is shifting is a really strong starting point. And then we start to then make that practical in real life, i.e., let's put in place the habit of paying myself first, keeping some of my own money. Next, where do I then invest that money I'm keeping? And then it kind of builds on from there.
Yeah, I think it's just changing that mindset, like you said, from I'm an earner and spender to I'm a wealth builder, even before your bank balance tells you that. And you mentioned £200 doesn't even have to start as £200, a month. It could start as something small as putting aside, and then every month you increase that amount that you're saving towards, whether that's an emergency fund or your into your pension pot or your stocks and shares ISA. It's about, even though you feel like you're not there yet, just starting very small, and then as you gain confidence and as you then tweak, like, oh wow, I was able to put aside this amount, what can I do next month to make sure that I can put aside double that? Do I need to change where I do the food shop? Do I need to maybe bulk buy, bulk cook, stop eating out? These small things, yeah, people might say, oh, you're not really going to make much of a saving with these small things. But actually, for somebody who is time poor, juggling many things as a single parent, these are some small things that you can actually put into place without having to get an extra job or.
In our new book, The Wealth Habit, we actually, one chapter is called the 24-hour pause button. And this is an interruption technique that is connected to the idea that a lot of us in the low friction world we live in, so everywhere we look, there's one click spend and all these things, right? They've removed all the friction to make it very easy for us to spend. What we teach in that chapter is this idea that we need to introduce interruption. We need to introduce friction, right? So for someone who's listening, who's maybe single or a single parent, or they're really struggling with finances, that one simple mental tool that you have a 24-hour break. By that I mean, if you're trying to buy anything, you see an offer anywhere, any expense whatsoever, put it on a list on your phone and call it, this is my 24-hour break list, according to Ken and Mary. I will look at this expense in 24 hours from now, and then I'll ask myself, am I still wanting to buy this thing? Is this still aligned with the future I deserve? Will my future self, if they were looking at me, would they be thankful to me, or would they be disappointed by this purchase I'm trying to make? That one simple interruption that anyone, no matter where they are in the world, can implement is enough for you to, over a month or 3 months, go from, wow, I was about to buy those headphones for 90 euros. I was about to, book that random holiday because I was feeling depressed, randomly using my credit card for this much. You can kind of tally them up and you can see that actually, if that holiday was aligning with the value you wanted, you might book it. But if those headphones were not really aligned with the future, you've actually saved that money by simply introducing that pause and that interruption. So these are all small little things we can begin to add. And then when these begin to compound, you might think, oh, this is just that, and that's quite small. But when you add that, all these little interruptions, these bits of friction, these habits, these little systems, the compounding effect of that is massive, not just in a month or a year, but years ahead, because you then start to become somebody else. And when you start to see the results, it also compounds like who you're becoming as well.
Thank you all for sharing. What is coming up for me? I really love the concept of this 24-hour pause. And it was something I started doing a long time ago. And I essentially started saving early on. And one of the things I started doing initially, you're like, oh my gosh, I have all this extra money. So let's shop this, let's shop that. And I started with the pause button. I'm going to pause for like 24 hours to see if I really want this, right? And then over time, even what happens with habits when they compound is it grows, it gets bigger. Now, if there's something I really want to buy, I'm going to wait 2 weeks. And I need to think about it. It needs to drill me into the ground for 2 weeks before I decide to buy it. But oftentimes I see, I didn't actually want that.
Yeah.
I don't care enough about it. I'm not even thinking about it. So that's one of the things that's come up for me as you're talking. It's not even it's what happens, the type of strength, like the mental strength you gain for yourself when you start with the little 24 hours. Eventually it becomes like a week, a month, or never. You don't ever have to buy it. And I think it's not just the financial habits you're building, it's the human habits that you're building as well. And something else that came up for me, when you talk about paying yourself first, I think that reframe is so important. And for me, one of the ways I've applied that is in what I call throwaway money. Yeah. So sometimes people think they need to have a lot of money to invest. Yeah. And sometimes for me, it's like £100 here. I started with like 15 euros here, right? Or there. And one of the things I do is it leaves my account before I even see it. It's not something I have to go manually do.
Yes.
I've already programmed it because it's the whole concept about, sometimes when you have an assignment or a project or a deadline, if you have 20 hours, you will use 20 hours.
Yes.
Yeah. But if you have 10, you will use 10. If you have 5, you will use 5. So it's also for me just rewiring my brain to think, okay, I'm just going to take that out so I don't have to see it. I don't have it. I cannot spend it. So, I also just want to kind of like confirm that what you were saying works because I have applied it in my own life and I see the impact it makes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So good to hear.
Amazing. No, we can't wait really for more people to begin to apply these ideas, because this is one thing I love about this work, is that what we're sharing is accessible to people no matter where they are on their financial journey, and no matter their gender or their ethnic background or their location in the world. These ideas carry over. They can, and yeah, they just need the frameworks to help them to actually do it.
And these are frameworks and systems that are tried and tested. These are things that we have done that helped us to achieve financial freedom. So, and it's totally, relatable. You can actually do these things. It's not rocket science, but it's being intentional to put it in place.
I love it. I love it. Okay, I have a question on investing. Where should people be investing in? What indexes? What kind of stocks? Like, what advice do you have?
I'd say if you're a beginner, if you're new to investing, we wouldn't say you should go picking specific individual stocks, because with investments, your money, you could actually lose your money, as well as you can make money, but you can lose your money. So we would say one of the simplest ways of actually doing this is to, firstly, you need to be clear on your purpose for investing. What's the investing for? Because investing is about a goal. It's not just because it's cool to invest. It needs to be a goal that you're trying to pursue. And investing is a long-term thing. So what's the goal? That's the purpose, your why. And then what's the specific objective you have about investing? Is there a specific amount you're trying to get to? Is it a portfolio for, your early retirement or for your financial freedom or whatever? And what's the time horizon you have? Is it 3 years, 5 years, 15 years, or whatever, right? That all matters, because that allows money to work over time. Then we're now coming to what's our now strategy for investing. Do we want somebody to invest for us? That's often called active investing. Or do we want to choose what's called trackers, things that track a particular index in the marketplace? An index is a list or a basket of companies. That's our preferred way to invest if you're new to investing, because that will help you invest in, say, the S&P 500 or a global index fund or ETF that's often low cost. That approach to investing is called passive investing. And we would say is one of the smartest ways to begin this journey, because when you do investing that way, your money goes into a basket of companies across the world. It's low cost, it's diversified, and it gives you the return of that market that you're trying to invest in. So, yeah.
I really love that. And I also invest in different index funds and ETFs. And I think I own a little piece of all these companies.
Yes.
When you're investing in like 3,000 businesses, there's something quite remarkable. And I think also a bit empowering about it. Yeah.
Absolutely. You have all of these companies working for you. And if they underperform, they get taken off and another performing company gets added. So you don't have to constantly, review to make, you don't have to worry as much.
In The Wealth Habit, our book, in chapter 14, is called The Effortless Investing Habit. And the reason I mention that in there, we teach this idea of imagine your wealth was a tank. Yeah. And question is if you have to fill that tank up to build wealth, how should you split your money? And in that book, we share that around 80 to 90% of your money should be in what we call your index core. Yeah. So this is your global, low cost, diversified index fund or ETF. Then around 10 to potentially 15% are in what we call your thematic ETFs. So thematic ETFs are ETFs that basically serve a particular area of value. You might be somebody who's interested in sustainability or technology or healthcare or whatever. So that bit is speaking to the value system that you hold dear. Okay. And then the top of that tank is then the third piece, which is 0 to 5% in what we call the opportunistic picks. So this is where you go, do you know what? I've seen a very unusual opportunity. This might be you wanting to, maybe a company has been, they've got good fundamentals, but they've had a bad day in the media, for example, and that they're going to recover. So you might put 0 to 5% into that company. And notice this is a system, what I've just explained here, because the core, that 80 to 90% is protecting your future. You're not betting the whole house on, one stock, spreading it globally. But then you're also speaking to your values through those thematic ETFs. And then finally, even if you did want individual stocks, that 0 to 5% is protective because it's putting a boundary, a limit on what you are putting into that area. So even if you did lose money, it's protected. Or if you made money, then it's fantastic, and so on. So again, this is covered in The Wealth Habit in astonishing detail with, lots of case studies and that sort of thing to accompany it as well.
I can't wait to read it. When does it come out?
It comes out in March.
Yeah.
March, what? Do we have a date?
19th of March, yes.
19th. Okay. Is it available for pre-order?
Absolutely. Please do get your pre-orders in. These help towards, just sending a signal to Amazon and all the retailers that this is a book to spotlight. Yeah. And also it helps us to hopefully becoming a second times Sunday Times bestseller.
Yeah.
That's our goal. So we would love for that to happen.
Everyone listening, please pre-order a physical copy. Okay, that's what counts for us for the Sunday Times bestseller. It's the physical book.
Oh, yes.
And also I wanted to say real quick that the book's now been translated. It's been translated into complex Chinese as well as into Italian at the moment. And we're expecting other langues to follow. But God willing. But these are all led by the pre-orders. So the more pre-orders we get, the more we get that happening.
That's amazing. I will find the link and include it, but I will also just order right after this session because why not? I mean, this has been really nourishing. So I want to thank you for all that insights. I do now want to shift to just a quick question around parenting, because of course, for me, I'm a parent. It's something I always grapple with. But before that, I've made a conscious promise to myself to give people their flowers while they're alive, because we only say really nice things about people when they die. But just observing the two of you, not that I spend time on social media besides like LinkedIn, but there was this thing that came on my feed. I think it was my chief of staff who sent it to me, where there was this two couple who posted a picture of themselves and the internet roasted them positively, saying something about they look like sparkling water or they look like Apple, the new model. Yeah. I just want to say that I think you both look like you do as well have your shit together. Yeah, like it's I think it's not just aspirational, it's also just showing what is possible.
Yes.
And it is obvious to me that there's a lot of communication and mutual respect that goes into, not just, I guess, your marriage as man and wife, but also as friends.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say that, like, I feel that and I see that, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. So thank you.
That means
Yeah.
thank you so much.
That means a lot. Yeah.
And, we're best friends. So it's just great that we're able to have this partnership, be able to work together and still stay happily married. Thank God.
It means a lot to hear that. So thank you.
So much.
Yeah.
No, but I think as well, it's also, for me, I think it's really remarkable to see and to name, because oftentimes we don't get the best visual of, a married couple who are doing something together. And even so, sometimes we have fewer representation when we look at Black couples or African couples. So it just warms my heart to see you both. I just wanted to say that, give you your flowers, and then I can move on now to the parents' question.
Very.
So you have 2 kids.
We do.
Yeah?
We do. 12 and 11.
12 and 11. How was that raising back to back?
Yeah. It's actually 20 months gap between them.
Is it 18?
So one's going to be 13 in March and one is 11. So
okay.
Yeah.
Because I was about to be like, 1 year, Mary, how did you do it?
20 months.
It literally was back to back. We had 2 under 2 at one point. You were doing your MBA. I was changing careers from corporate to running a nursery business. Oh, it was a lot.
It was a lot.
It was very intense. But yeah, they're best friends. And it's just helped a lot, them being close together in age, One of the best things was passing down the clothes from my firstborn to my second. Just like the toys all being, nearby and not having to always have to organize play dates and stuff like that because they kept each other company. Less pressure on us.
I really love that. I have 2. They are 3.5 years apart. My first is a girl. And because I am pro savings and being sensible, my son has inherited some clothes from my daughter. Yeah. I imagine you'll be okay. It builds character, right? And I refuse to, it's a scam buying clothes for kids.
Oh my God.
You spend ridiculous amounts of money. They go to kindergarten for 1 day and then it becomes like it's slime and dirty. And I'm just like, you know what? Arinze, you will forgive me someday. I'm not going to put you in a dress, but you will wear pink. You will wear something with flowers. You will wear some sparkles shirts. We'll be okay. Especially because he's 2.5. Okay. So he will forgive me in the future. My daughter is 6. She's going to be 7 in November.
Amazing. Okay. Our children have older cousins, so their clothes is second hand. Our youngest is third hand, and then I have a younger nephew, so he gets it as well. So it's gone through all the cousins, them down, and it makes me feel happy. Like out, and also it helps the environment too.
It helps the environment. It saves money. We also do with our friends where we just hand down. So when I have friends who have older kids. So my daughter is also quite tomboyish because some of my friends have boys. And she just wears those clothes because and I don't care that she doesn't have the newest or latest thing, Like it's good quality stuff. It's been handed down and it makes sense for the environment. It also makes sense for my finances. So I think a lot of people as well, since we're talking about finances, spend money on emotional purchases. And it's also important to interrogate, why do I need to buy this shirt for my daughter that costs 50 euros, for example? Yeah, I live in Norway. Everything is expensive. But, why do I have to do it? Is it necessary? What am I trying to prove? So to say, if she's clean and taken care of, that is the point.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. But I did want to ask you, you're who you are, you've built what you've built, and I can imagine that you will only continue to grow bigger and bigger, and I want the whole world to know about you. How are you raising your boys? What are you teaching them about money and investing and financing?
Well, I'd say, firstly, we're trying to help them develop their relationship with money by observing how we manage money. I give you an example. Our son recently was asking for about 15. He was trying to buy something like an editing pack for $15 from another creator because he's into video editing. And we were like, okay, well, we can give you the $15, but we wanted him to read a book and do a review of the book and then come back and present to us what the book was about. So that we could actually see he read the book. How long did he spend reading the book?
He read it, I think, in a week.
About a week.
About a week, yeah. So the particular book was it was actually Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Poor Dad. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a money book, actually. It could be,
There's lots
any
of
sort
books.
of book, personal development, and they also have the option to read a book of their choice. But it has to be varied, not just your choices, but actually something that develops you. And also writing a review means that they've not just skimmed it, they've actually read to understand, and they've learned from it, and they solidify that learning by regurgitating it back to us verbally and also writing it down. That's one thing. But we also, that pack, for example, that he wanted to download, you then asked him, what do you think is the business model behind this? You're actually purchasing something online.
Passive income for somebody else.
Income, exactly. You can also be that person who creates that value. And so we teach them to be creators of value, that learn how to solve problems rather than just consumers. How can you be the producer? How can you create that passive income yourself? And we allow them the freedom to actually do this, obviously through supervision. We're not leading it. We're more just there to help them, guide them, whatever that is that they want to do. But there's freedom and space for them to actually do that. You don't just have to consume all the time. What's the business model behind this thing that you're purchasing or that thing that you're consuming? How can you also create that?
We also teach them that money is born out of creativity, and that they have inbuilt creativity. So we don't just say it, but we pay for resources that help them to explore their creativity in different ways, whether that's music lessons or AI tools that they are using for different creative projects, or editing software, or just anything that means that they have a variety in their creative tool set. And naturally, we started investing for them when they were literally born. But what's interesting is that over the years, we've gotten them involved in the investing process. So when we want to make an investment for them using either our money or some money that they've gotten from somewhere, for which they keep a portion and then they spend a portion, we get them to come and sit here at this computer. We log into their account and we're like, okay, what we're going to invest in today, should we top up on an existing investment or should we explore something else? And if it's something else, what's the case for it? Like recently I was asking them, should we invest in Roblox, which is one of these games they play? They actually said no. Like, even though I was like super keen on this company because I thought there's a big possibility for it because it has big community and all that. But them as the gamers, they had reasons why they countered the investing decision. They were like, actually, this is why we think we shouldn't invest in this. And instead we bought some index funds and so on. So a big part of their journey has been them really understanding that there is a connection between their present self and their future self, and that they will arrive at that future self at some point. Because the question is how are you preparing for when you arrive there? What do you want to see when you get there? Do you want to get there and then you don't have any skills, any in-demand skills for the future, no money, no investments? Or do you want to get there and have freedom like your mommy and daddy have freedom?
Yeah.
Like when I still come home to our house, I still walk in and I still say, welcome to our mortgage-free house. I want it to sink in that this is something that will become their reality. They could do it a lot quicker. They could do it a lot better. They could have investments in different asset classes. And we teach them to be enterprising. It's in our nature to be enterprising. So when we do the school run, we're picking up from school, we might stop at a traffic light and I look at the sweet shop and I say, among all these row of shops here, which do you think makes the most money and why? So I want them to pitch the idea and go, I think it's a sweet shop because they have X number of customers per minute, or they have, high value products. So again, we're trying to shift how they think. So they don't just think that there's a connection necessarily between I need to swap my time to make money, but that money can work for me. Yeah. And also I don't need anyone's permission to make money. I can actually create money by myself from anywhere. I could do it from this room. I could do it from the internet. I could do it from owning a physical business. I could do it from doing different things.
And we teach them how to budget. They've learned how to budget from a very young age. They're always getting birthday money from their grandparents, Christmas money. And like you said, a portion of it gets invested. Some of it they spend. Some of it they actually give 10% to charitable cause or, something that they're passionate about. It's important for them to understand that stewardship. But also with the budgeting, like if we give them maybe an amount that they can spend, then if they decided to look online or go to the Smith store, if they pick up something and they see, oh, it's above my budget, they put it down. We don't have to, tell them. They already know. They're sticking to spending within their means, but we're also teaching them to have an abundance mindset. So although you have a budget, it's not because you don't have enough money, it's because you're setting aside the money for your future self. But you can still spend now, but you can also put aside money for your future self. It helps them to remove the kind of scarcity that could creep in, but to have more of an abundance mindset that they're thinking about the future.
I love this. I love this. I think there's an intentionality in any case to how you both exist in the world and obviously how you both parent. I really loved what you said, Mary, about teaching your children that they could be creators of value. I really love that frame. And when I also hear about young kids, and when I was 11, I was not going to a shop going, yeah, I don't have the budget for this, right? And I'm like, I just wanted it. But what is also coming up for me, because I have younger kids. So for me, it's also that aspiration. What I try to do with my daughter when she's like, oh, I want this. I'm like, let's talk about where the money comes from. When she was younger, it was this card, this plastic card. I'm like, no, let's talk about, how much mommy or daddy has to work to get money into this bank account so you could pay for something. And we're also trying to teach them about, investing in knowing once you have kids, every month the government sends you money to support. They send you like maybe an equivalent of 100 and 200 pounds per month per child. And so for me, what happens is that money has initially just goes into a index fund that I have for them. I did the same thing with my daughter, did the same thing with my son. And I do want to teach them when they're able to understand, okay, let's talk about investment. So what you're saying makes it very possible and real. So thank you for that. Okay, I want to go into a speed round with the both of you. So I do want to start by asking, what are you aspiring to in your personal and professional life?
Oh, great question. So professionally, I guess the next chapter is about, we want to scale, but without actually personal sacrifice. So we're all about building systems, platforms, and hopefully partnerships that will still allow us to help millions of people build financial confidence and independence, not just through our content, but through our community, through our education, through real behavioral change. That's why Financial Joy Academy, our books, Financial Joy, and our new book, The Wealth Habit, matters so much to us because, they're about making wealth building accessible, sustainable, but also human. Personally, we're just, do you want to speak
I think
on that?
personally, we're just trying to live a lot more intentionally. Like when we started this year, we asked each other, what are our words of the year? You said,
reality.
And I said joy. Right. So I think personally, we want to just really live a more intentional and spacious life. Right. So more time with our children, more time with each other, more health is a big thing for us at the moment. We'd want to also travel with purpose and the freedom really to keep saying yes to things that truly align with us, not just the need to take up every opportunity, but to just say actually no to a number of things and yes to certain things that we feel really, really aligned. So the next chapter for us really is more about legacy, it's more about intentionality, and it's more about joy. Yeah, that's how I'd put it. I'd say if financial freedom was kind of like chapter 1, then this chapter is actually using it more wisely, using those those resources to create the impact that then outlives us in the future.
I love it. Advice to your younger self, Mary. If you could speak to younger Mary, what would you say to her?
I'd say just go for it. If you have an idea to do something, don't worry that it's already been done because you are very unique. You have lived a different life and people value your perspective and your take on things. So when I was younger, a lot of things that I wanted to do that I already talked myself out of it because it's already been done by somebody. But that somebody doesn't hold the same grace as me. They don't hold the same experience or wisdom. And so I've missed, out on those kind of opportunities because of that mindset. So it's actually a scarcity mindset. So I would say to go for it anyway. And also I would just tell myself that peace is a valid ambition as well. You don't have to prove your worthiness through busyness or spending, or trying to look a certain way. Build money habits that protect your well-being and your relationships, and trust that moving in your own pace consistently with intention That will take you further than maybe chasing somebody else's version of what success is.
I love that. I think a lot of us can relate to that. Thanks for sharing. Ken?
Do you know what? I would say to my much younger self, maybe 15 years ago, invest even more aggressively.
Yes.
The future is very uncertain, and a lot of people are sitting on their hands and don't really have an idea for where we're going. I just think that investing buys a lot of freedom, and I would want to be doing that. I'd also want to stop waiting for maybe certainty before taking certain responsibilities and certain leaps. One of the things I would wish I'd told my younger self a lot earlier is that you don't need permission to design your own pathway. Yeah, it's a very important thing. It's like a real epiphany moment when you realize that. It's very liberating when you're like, actually, I get to choose. By God's grace, obviously, I lay my plans before God, but I get to choose which way I go. I can get to start to build systems early. I can start to work smarter early, right? In small ways, right? I'd realized that identity plays such a big role in who I will become in the future. So I'd want to let my younger self know that and to choose freedom a lot more deliberately and not to be afraid to choose it. Yeah, and say to my younger self, this is not just for the Americans.
Yes.
I love it.
It's accessible to us.
Yes, it is accessible. Absolutely. I love the permission. Yeah, and permission piece, the agency piece as well, because you can. And oftentimes it's that thing we have to unlearn and just rewire that people like me deserve this too. People like me can achieve this, right? If we put in the work. I really love that. What is one piece of wisdom that guides how you both lead?
I think one is that money should create peace, like I said, and not pressure. So if your financial choices cost you your health, your relationships, your sleep, your sense of self, then quite frankly, they're too expensive. True freedom, what we feel, is being able to sleep at night and sleep well and move forward.
I love that. I love that. Ken, any contribution? Or you're on that?
I'd probably say I absolutely love that. Say that for me, it's to design your money so that it supports the life that you want, not the image you're trying to maintain.
That.
Yeah. So financial freedom, we all hear the buzzwords, but if we're being truly honest about it, it comes from building simple, automated habits that quietly compound over time. Yeah. When money has a job to do, life definitely feels a lot lighter. So that's,
I love that. Design something that works for the life that you want, not the image. Oof. That was good. That was good. Okay. For someone listening to this who sees themselves in your story, what can they do this week or today to change their lives? Or to start?
First, order the wealth habit.
Yes,
but
do it.
Beyond that, for real, I'd say set up one automatic transfer.
Yeah.
However small, so towards your savings and investments. So what that actually does, that one simple act, is kind of saying that I'm the kind of person who builds the future that I want. It's a signal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Identity actually begins to change through action, not just intention.
Intention helps, but it's the action.
It's the action
that change your identity.
Yeah.
I love that. It's also a thing. I had anxiety growing up, and one of the things that worked for me was action. Yeah. Like action cures my anxiety like that. It's like, it's because normally it's trying to tell you something. And then when you start listening and then you start acting, it goes a long way. So I really love what you say. Intention is great, but impact is more important, right? Do the thing, put one foot in front of the other. Love that. Okay. What book changed your lives? You're authors now. So is there a book for either of you that you think, oh my gosh, this impacted me significantly?
I mean, this is going to probably sound cliche, but definitely the Bible. That's what's had the most impact on us. The Holy Bible. Yeah.
I'd probably add, there's a book I read years ago called Designing Your Life. It came out of the Stanford lab on like life design and behavior change and that sort of thing. That book for me is a small book, but it was very instrumental for just helping me see that the future we wanted was a design problem that could be solved. So if we just viewed the life from that perspective as, this is a design problem, we need to come up with a design that works and solve the design problem, then we could actually get there. So it was a big shift in how I thought about life.
I love that. You can design the life you want.
Yes.
Yeah. You can design yourself out of a bad situation.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay. What did you used to value that you no longer value?
I used to value just any friendship, but I now value almost like quality more than quantity. Yeah. So the quality of the friendship for me is way more than how many followers, subscribers. Those are nice, but they're not really the thing. The thing is, the handful of people I know who truly love me and I love them and love us, and we do it the same for them as well. So yeah.
Do you think that's something that comes with age?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah, definitely.
Ken disagrees.
No, it's not that I disagree. I think so, I think it's probably like when we turn 40, because we're in our early 40s, and yeah, I'd say health and relationships became like top priority. When we got into our, when we turned 40. So it really started to matter who we were spending time with, and particularly as we started to have, I don't know, a public platform and that sort of thing. Who you really have in your circle matters so much.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I think you just don't. I think it comes with age. Because I mean, I remember when I was 35 and even 30 or 25, and I'm like, yeah, I have it all figured out. And then you're like 38 and you're like, hold on, what? So I think there's a kind of clarity, but I guess it's something that you build up to, but there's that clarity for quality over quantity. And especially as parents, you barely have time. Yeah. So it's just like the time I have, where do I want to spend it? Do I want to be in a space that depletes me, or do I want to be in a space that nourishes me? Mary, I want to come to you. Do you have something you valued that you no longer value?
I think maybe something that I may have valued was like acquiring things, but now it's more acquiring experiences. And, again, that's down to quality experiences. So whether that's us going away as a couple on holiday or with our boys, spending time as a family, I definitely value experiences more now.
And I'll just add to yours, actually. We value the quality of what we're eating as well.
I was going to add to that too, but yeah, definitely the quality of our food.
A lot more.
I love that. I love that. Okay, final question for you. We've been talking today about identity clarity. I think your book also touches on identity. I really look forward to reading that chapter in particular. And this is really just, at least within my framework, around knowing who you are, what you stand for, what you won't trade. For anyone listening to this who's realizing that they've been living according to somebody else's script, especially when we talk about money, friendship, success, what do you want them to know? Or what do you want them to do?
I'd say one thing I'd want them to know is this, and it's the financial stress isn't a money problem, it's an identity mismatch, okay? So when you live by somebody else's definition of success, and we've all done it, even doing well can feel heavy, right? So here's the one thing that they can start to do today. The one thing is to name the version of success that you've inherited, then consciously start to redesign it. Yeah. So what would you add to that?
Yeah. So, we teach people to write down, it could be a short list. And the first one is success used to mean, and then write that down. So it could be titles, income, postcodes, lifestyle signals. And then the second thing you write is then success now means. And then you insert whatever that now means to you. So it could now mean freedom instead of titles, peace instead of time instead of lifetime signals, impact, alignment. It could mean those things that, again, will be unique to you. And then you might want to take one small financial decision this month, that serves the second list, not the first one. And that is how your identity then begins to shift. Not through big declarations. They help, affirmations help too, but it's actually through tiny, repeatable proof, because that proof gives you evidence.
Your habits shape your identity. Yeah. And once your money habits reflect who you actually are, wealth actually stops feeling like pressure or or anything like that, and starts feeling like you are taking small steps towards progress. Yeah. That in effect is what we say when we say that's the wealth habit in action. That's it actually working for you. Is you've looked at the layer of identity, you've worked on mindset, you've worked on habits, and then you've then begin to systemize it.
I really love that. Thanks for sharing. Just thinking about, Mary, what you said about a success used to mean and what it means now for me. I love to write. And I also believe, I think there's research on this, when you write something down, it's clearer, it's more present for you, right? You're writing it into existence in a way. And I think, throughout this conversation, you all have also just offered us actionable things that are accessible. It's like small things we can actually start doing to shift our mindset to make better decisions for the now and the future self. That was the question that Mary asks Ken about chocolate. Will your future self be proud of you for this decision you're making? I love it. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Thank you both. Sorry, Ken, did you want to say something?
No, I was just going to just echo what you were saying about writing stuff down. Because actually in the book, we feature a practice in Japan. In the modern world, people don't really, there's a disconnect between our spending and our reality. By that I mean, we don't really know where things are going or where they're coming from as much as we should. But in Japan, there's a practice that's a few hundred years old where every month they literally have these notepads where they write out their expenses. They actually physically write them out. They go through and write them out, and the idea of writing it out begins to rewire your relationship with money, because it makes you question, why have I really put this much money, 55 euros or $70 or £100 into this specific expense? The fact that you've put 3 hours into writing your expenses out really makes you glaringly see some patterns. Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to add that to.
Oh, I love that. I was just thinking I need to start doing that because I'm pretty good with money, but I feel like if I have to write 3-4 pages, it's going to annoy me. And then I have to look at what the heck am I buying? Yeah. What's the extra thing I'm not seeing that needs to go out of this list? Oh my gosh, thank you. That was amazing.
Communication tool, like potentially with you and your husband, where you've written all this stuff out. You don't just leave it in the notepad, you talk about it. You're like, babe, like, look what I just noticed.
Or you may want to hide it.
But you may want to hide it. Yeah.
No, I feel like we need to remove the shame from it. Yeah. It's like, oh my gosh, I bought that. I will not do that again. Yeah. Not ever. So I think it's also important to lean into that shame and own it. It's not shame. It's just something I did. And I need to be more conscious, because when you're conscious, like to solve a problem, you have to admit it exists. Yes. Yeah. And if I see the thing, I can solve it. If I don't see it, I can't fix it. So yeah.
Information.
Absolutely. Thank you both, Ken and Mary, for being here, for sharing so generously. I really appreciate you. And I know that this is something, I know my community has been asking for this. And I feel like they consider me a nag now, because it's like they always hear it from me. So I'm just like, okay, I needed to get people here who could talk to them, who they could see themselves in as well. So thank you both for being here, for sharing. And I look forward to your book, to reading your book, to holding it.
Thank you so much. Look, we've really enjoyed this podcast, by the way, and we've done a few podcasts, and I've just really loved the questions that you've asked us. It's really
thank you.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, we've never been asked a lot of questions you asked us in the way you asked them. So it's really fun to talk about it, because it really matters, and we know that this work actually impacts people. Like, people actually listen to this stuff and do something on the back of it. If people, I guess, wanted to know more about what we do, where should they find us?
Yeah, so we are on YouTube at The Humble Penny, and Instagram and TikTok. We also have our blog, thehumblepenny.com. But we also have a community, financialjoyacademy.com. It's a community of dream makers who, we have amazing people within the community who want to level up in their career, or they want to expand or scale their side hustle. They want to go into property. They want to improve their personal finances and invest. Our community helps them take that next level.
I love it. And I will get all the links. I want people I can see just how this can be beneficial, not just from my friends and my immediate community, but I'm thinking also for
the community within my nonprofit organization, Diversify. Financial education, literacy is one of the topics that a lot of the women in the community, ask for.
Yeah.
So this is something I'm also just going to send directly to them as well.
Brilliant.
Yeah, this has been great. Thank you so much. I can't wait to read your book, really. I feel like as somebody who knows a lot about finances, I still learned so much from this conversation. And for me, that's always a a sign for me is what am I learning, from this? They suggesting or adding new ways of thinking about things. And I can say wholeheartedly that I feel like I have been expanded.
Good.
So thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Overnight Wisdom. Here's your one takeaway. Notice this week when you're performing instead of leading, when you're shape-shifting instead of being authentic. That awareness is where identity clarity begins. New episodes every Wednesday. Subscribe, and if this resonated, share it with someone who needs to hear it. I'm Chisom. Thank you for being here.